But if you don't know, again, going back to the reason I wrote the Human Magnet Syndrome, if you don't know what it is, and you don't know where it comes from, then you're not going to know the solution. And the solution is to trace it back to the trauma that was experienced as a child, to get there in a way that very few therapists can get there, and that is to evoke the repressed experience of the trauma. So if we think of PTSD, a person locks away the horrific traumatic memories because they could not deal with them in the moment. So the mind has like a circuit breaker. It shuts everything down. It puts those memories in a nice little packet and stores them in the back of our mind. Actually, literally in our limbic system and in our amygdala. The therapy that resolves codependency, the Codependency Cure, is a therapy that can tap into that psychological energy, those memories, can tap into the part of the brain that stores these memories that are repressed. We don't even know them or remember them. And because we have that wounded person that still is inside of us. Just because we are conscious of it, that wounded person doesn't have a voice and does not connect to the thinking part of our brain, which is where most therapy works on.
Right.
So we have to figure out a way to connect to the core experience that is unconscious, that keeps playing out. It's like the little child inside of us keeps playing this out. So that's why I am so passionate about what I do, is because I want to not only teach people how they can get better, so they can bring it back to their therapist. Because a lot of therapists will know what to do or can learn how to do this. I created the 6 stages of self-love deficit disorder recovery. It explains the linear and progressive stages in the recovery process, and somewhere around stage 3, the end of 3 and the beginning of 4, there is a change in a person where self-love, which there's no coincidence why I call it codependency self-love deficit disorder, but self-love actually starts to take root. And once we are able to push down the self-love deficit, the shame, the self-destructive thoughts, and nurture and grow the self-love and this organic process of standing up for yourself and protecting yourself and owning the importance of that, we have a shift where things start getting, the problems with narcissists become less and less, your boundaries become less and less impaired and more strengthened. And that's the best you can do. It is a trajectory that builds upon itself. Because what I'm teaching now is the problem, codependency, is SLDD, self-love deficit disorder. The solution is not recovering codependent. I'm going to bust apart the 12-step idea that you're always going to be a codependent. It's going to be over. Because once you do the work, the trauma work, and you deal with the core shame, and you deal with the pathological loneliness and the SLD addiction, there is a seismic shift inside of you where you can't go back. A living example of the reason I came up with self-love deficit disorder and self-love abundance. The problem and the solution is that whatever you're doing is you're building greater resources of self-love, making you more resilient. It's helping your self-esteem. It's helping you be the captain of your own ship. And that's the best we can do in life. My goal in my clients is not to make mistakes, but is to own your mistakes, grow from them, learn from them, and be better from them. And I love the term organic, because organic can be traced back to, you think of farming without pesticides. You think of plants growing as they should be without intervention. Well, I mean, the healing or the SLDD recovery is organic because it's addressing a problem as it really is. And if we look at it as the trauma being this infection that you've always had, that you never knew how to treat, and you've always were afraid to go to a doctor. Well, we are going back all the way down into that infection, and it's painful, and we are dealing with all the pain, but it's there to make it go away. And once we resolve that trauma, it's resolved, and it's just a memory. It goes from our unconscious, trauma-based thought process, which is highly triggered, that actually does not connect to our thinking, to our conscious thought processes in which we have the opportunity to make decisions and to use all of our emotional and intellectual resources. If it's disorder, is they're solving the problem at the level that it is, healing and becoming who they should have always been. I'd like to say is that the language that they had before wasn't their words. It was tapes. It was tapes of the child that they used to be that had no power, who was surrounded by narcissists growing up. It's the tapes, I'm not good enough. I'm not, no one will love me. I'm only going to be lovable if I do this for people. Why am I so stupid? I need to be smarter. Someone will leave me. I don't want to be lonely. So we identify those as our thoughts. But in reality, those thoughts are energized by the trauma that we're carrying. So let's say we use the infection analogy, and we cure this infection, and it's no longer impacting everything beyond it, and the trauma is resolved. Now we're having thoughts, our thoughts. We're not carrying the thoughts, the tapes of the child. These are who we are.
Right.
Here and now, present, healthy, in recovery. And that's what I heard you say, is that as you get healthy, your thoughts start to represent you more, because they are for you and about you. They're not connected to the shit of the past.
Right.
The sad part is it never will take root when someone has SLDD or codependency, because they don't have the psychological infrastructure to manage that process. That you got to love yourself, just because remember that the part that fuels or fortifies SLDD is the unconscious shame, the unresolved trauma, and that's that child inside of us that keeps being the victim. So they hear people like you and I say, just love yourself.
Right, and they think it's trite, and
But let's say they like it. Let's say they go, absolutely, I'm going to love myself more. I'm going to say 5 affirmations every morning. I'm going to buy myself a cupcake or whatever would be the self-loving thing. And we should not stop that. Absolutely. But it doesn't last if it doesn't also recognize the source of why we can't do it. And so that's where the therapy really needs to go, is to help people understand their thoughts, the tapes, the messages they say, the self-destructive predictions, but also who is that person inside of them that's really talking? And talk to that person and solve that person's problem, which is the child they used to be, who's carrying that trauma that never thinks it's going to go away. And remember, that part is in our amygdala. It's not connected to our prefrontal cortex, which is who we are, our personality. It's more of a feeling and a nagging sensation. We connect those two, and someone has a chance to really internalize the advice that we give. And for those who haven't read my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, there's a theory in it that's called the continuum of self theory. And I'm not going to have time to go into it, but it explains mathematically how people who are oriented towards everyone else's needs matches up with people that are oriented towards their own needs, specifically how codependents and narcissists match up. When there is not a matchup, the two people feel uncomfortable. So that this chemistry that people feel, this attraction force, the human magnet syndrome, will bring the codependent and the narcissist together. But the same attraction force, and as I will demonstrate with the paramagnets. By the way, I got these magnets before I actually came up with the title for my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. So when the north pole of a magnet matches up with the south pole, we have an attraction. So when when a codependent matches up with a narcissist, there's a perfect attraction.
Oh, yeah.
This person who doesn't have self-esteem, who doesn't know how to articulate their own needs, fits with the person that has way too much self-esteem, who's narcissistic. But what happens if that codependent goes in major therapy, gets healthy, builds self-love? Their polarity, you can't see this, but it pushes away.
Right.
It pushes away. And so what I'm saying to you is that when you get healthy, people who are narcissists aren't going to really connect with you. And your codependent friends who you guys commiserated together with won't get you anymore. And that's the number one message that they were told. Anytime they should stand up for themselves and set a boundary, you're selfish. So what they're doing is they're projecting this very same thing that they don't like onto you. So when you are around people, whether it's codependents or narcissists, and you are getting healthy and they don't like it, it's the magnets not lining up. But if you take it, then if you could like imagine the same group that had the equal amount of growth and health, then the human magnet syndrome works again. Because human magnet syndrome also accounts for the attraction of like healthy opposite people.